Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 3, Oathbreaker. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Game of Thrones. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to Season 6, Episode 3. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, this video will not contain other kinds of spoilers such as from the novels or production links, so it will be free of those kinds of spoilers. So overall, this episode was interesting with a lot of interesting tidbits. I don't think filler is the right word for this episode, as I think it did progress the story along a lot. That being said, nothing much interesting really happened in it, so maybe setup episode is a better word for it. So before I get into the specific locations, let me talk about the opening sequence, because I have a bit of an axe to grind about this, because in the opening credits for the first time since Season 4 they skipped Braavos. So I thought that meant we weren't going to get Braavos in this episode, but we did, and we saw Pike in the opening credits, but we didn't see Pike in the episode, so they kind of messed up here. It kind of annoyed me, but I guess ultimately it's no big deal. So let's start at the wall, where we see the big aftermath of Jon Snow's revival. Apparently Davos walked back into the room shortly after he woke up. Perhaps he heard his big gasp for breath, so Jon is understandably confused and even specifically says he shouldn't be here. Melisandre seems beside herself with a renewed faith, who sincerely tries to convince Jon that he is the prince who was promised. Seems to me that she's getting her prophecies mixed up here, because I thought she believed Stannis was Azor Ahai, not necessarily the prince who was promised, or maybe she believed he was both. I'm not sure, but apparently she has not changed. She has changed focus from Stannis to Jon, which was exactly what I thought would happen. However, I don't think they explored that very well in this episode, and I hope they touch on it more later on. So Davos has a little pep talk with him and tells him to go out and fail again. So he goes out, and everyone is in awe that he's alive, and apparently the wildlings thinks he's a god, and when Jon insists to Tormund that he isn't, I like his response. He's like, I know, I saw your pecker. What kind of god would have a pecker that small? Classic Tormund Giantsbane line. I loved it. And then Jon quirks a joke to Ed, who jokes back that it's funny. Are you sure you're still in there? So it's another great little moment. So then later on they prepare to hang those who killed Jon for treason. Some speculated that Jon would show mercy on them, and I kind of half expected him to, but apparently not. Jon did oversee the execution, so it seems like he was still Lord Commander, but it seemed to me this decision was made before him. So he doesn't seem to take any great pleasure in it, but he goes through with it nonetheless. He has last words with each of the condemned, except Ollie. I think he was too hurt to say anything to him. However, shouldn't it be more than just 4 people up there being hanged? Because I remember there being a bit more than that who actually stabbed him. Maybe they're killing the others separately. I don't know. It seems like they would, if they might get the ringleaders having like the heads like Aerys Thorne and Bowen Marsh, but they also have Ollie up there. So if they have Ollie up there, why don't they have the other people participate in it? I like Alish's last words to Jon as he tries to taunt him with the fact that he'll soon be at rest, while Jon will have to fight on, almost spinning it around like it's a bad thing that he'll have to continue living. And I think it actually got to him. I do get the sense that Jon isn't completely pleased with the fact that he was brought back to life. So after the deed is done, he gives his coat to Ed and says that Castle Black is his, and while he's running off, he says, my watch has ended, which something else I thought would happen is technically death releases him from the Night's Watch vows, and he died, so he's no longer in the Night's Watch. Although that is a technicality that could be disputed, but I don't think anyone in the Night's Watch, especially now that it's in the hands of his friends, are going to dispute that with him and will likely just let him go. Where? Well, that's something we'll hopefully find out soon. It seems Jon is, the one who is now in need of a purpose. So next we'll go somewhere over the sea where Sam and Gilly are traveling to Old Town by boat, and the scene is about as exciting as most Sam and Gilly scenes are. That being said, I'm actually a fan of Sam and Gilly, and I like them together sometimes. I don't agree with all the Sam and Gilly hate, but totally agree that sometimes their scenes together can be rather boring. However, this one wasn't too bad. The main purpose of it was to let us know that Sam is not taking Gilly to Old Town because they won't allow women in the Citadel, so he's taking her to Hornhill where his family will look after her while he's at the Citadel. I'm not quite sure if he cleared this with them first. Something tells me that he didn't, but oh well. The other interesting piece of information here is that Gilly calls Sam the father of her child. Obviously, she doesn't mean biologically, but in every other sense. Anyway, she agrees to go even if it means that they will separate, which he swore he'd never do, but I think she understands now the predicament that he's in. The other thing I wanted to mention here was that we get the scene we saw in the trailer with the ships going in the storm. I was kind of hoping that that would be the Ironborn, but knew it would probably be the ships that Sam was traveling on, which isn't as exciting, but oh well. So next, let's go to the Tower of Joy. So Bran and the Bloodraven are having a nice little flashback to where Ned Stark and Howland Reed and a bunch of other Stark loyalists confront Sir Arthur Dayne and another Targaryen loyalist at the Tower of Joy. The dialogue starts off quite similar as it was in the books, but then it gets a bit different, as there are several differences, such as there were 3 Kingsguard there instead of just 2. Anyway, this was a cool fight scene where Arthur Dayne took down 5 people by himself until it was just him and Ned, and I liked the exchange between Bran and the Bloodraven while watching this, where Bran was like, oh, he beat him. I heard the stories when I was a kid. And the Bloodraven was like, did he? And then we see Sir Arthur Dayne disarms Ned, but then Howland Reed stabs him in the back, and then Ned kills him, which is quite interesting, as Ned has always been painted as someone honorable who wouldn't stab anyone in the back, but when Howland Reed does it in order to save him, he's okay with it. The other interesting things is that the Bloodraven made a point to point out that this was Howland Reed, Mira's father. So it makes me wonder if we'll see him in present times, and that he'll still have a part to play, and that if it was necessary to establish him as a backstabber. And then we hear a woman shouting from the tower, and I like how when Bran called out after Ned, he actually heard him, which was a nice little thing here that has some implications that Bran can affect things in the past. However, when they get back, the Bloodraven explains that the past is already written, the ink is dry, sort of like a whatever happened from Lost kind of mantra. So obviously Bran can't change the past, but I think he can affect things somehow. Maybe some things that already happened in the past happened because of his interference, like maybe why Hodor can only say Hodor, but who knows. However, I now have to talk about how I'm a victim of my own expectations, because I so expected R+L=J to be revealed in this episode, but unfortunately not. When Bran kept saying he wanted to go into the tower, it's like he was speaking for me, and when the Bloodraven refused him, I was like, oh, shut up, Bloodraven, just let him go in the freaking tower. It does seem like he specifically didn't want him to find out about R+L=J, and he actually seemed sad when Bran was so insistent to go in. So I hope they follow up on this later on, and I'm convinced that they will. They foreshadowed R+L=J so heavily last year, they'll definitely get back to it, and I think Bran is going to insist on knowing what happened in the tower now that he's curious. So I was initially really disappointed they didn't show it in this episode, but I'll have to see where they take it from here. They might justify it later on in the season. Back in the cave, we get another important piece of information when Bloodraven tells Bran specifically that he won't end up stuck under the tree like he is, and that he needs to learn everything before he leaves the cave. Plus, he said he was sitting under the tree for 1,000 years, which is inconsistent if this is Brendan Rivers, who is only like a couple hundred years old. So I wonder if the show is changing the fact that he's Brendan Rivers, or perhaps he was just speaking figuratively. I don't know. So then we go to Vals Dothraki, where the Khaleesi returns home and meets the Dosh Khaleen, and is still enraged that she is being kept there, but the others explain she broke the rules by not returning to Vals Dothraki as soon as Drogo died, and thus will have to be judged, as she might be punished for doing so, and the best that she can hope for is that they allow her to remain with the Dosh Khaleen, which she isn't really happy with. So not much to say about this scene. It was interesting setup, but we'll just have to see where they go with this from here. So then we go to Meereen and get a nice little scene with Varys interrogating the prostitute that helped the Sons of the Harpy commit their attacks. I absolutely loved the scene as it showed Varys at his best. I loved how he was like, oh, I'm not going to torture you, but instead he blackmailed her. And I love how he surprised her by knowing things about her, and the way he manipulated her was awesome. Classic Varys. I absolutely love this scene. And then we get a great scene with Tyrion trying to chit-chat with Missandei and Grey Worm, and not finding them to be the most engaging conversationalists. I found this quite funny, and it seemed like they're almost about to play the same drinking game that they played, that he played with Shay and Bronn back in season 1. I would have loved to have seen this too, but then Varys returns and reports that he found out who's funding the Sons of the Harpy, and it's the masters of Yunkai, Astapor, and Volantis. Now, Astapor must be a new development. However, it was just in last week's episode he mentioned Astapor was retaken by the slavers. In season 4, Jorah mentioned a butcher named Cleon who killed all the masters. So where did these great masters of Astapor come from? Yunkai, I guess, maybe Volantis. At any rate, I'm glad they mentioned Volantis was involved in trying to overthrow Daenerys, because since Volantis' economy depends on slavery, it makes sense that they would try to overthrow Daenerys and her anti-slavery position. So Grey Worm and Missandei suggest violence is the only way to respond to them, but also they mentioned the conundrum they're in, because if the Unsullied leave to sack Astapor or Yunkai, they'll leave Meereen defenseless. So then Tyrion asks Varys if he can get a message out to these masters of these 3 cities. So it seems like he's up to something, and I can't wait to see what that is. So ultimately, this is what was just set up, but it's a really interesting setup. It looks like it's setting up something really good. So then we go to King's Landing, where we see Qyburn with his new army of little birds that used to belong to Varys. So it's interesting to actually see Qyburn acting as the Master of Whispers, because we haven't seen him do this yet. Then Cersei and Jaime come in with Robert Strong, whom Qyburn refers to as Sir Gregor. So I suppose in the show they still refer to him as Gregor Clegane instead of pretending he's someone else called Robert Strong. And we get a cool little scene of Jaime sort of taunting him, and he starts to look pissed, and Qyburn was like, oh no, he understands well enough. But when Jaime suggests he go and kill the High Sparrow, Cersei explains that the High Sparrow is too well protected and Gregor can't kill all of them, but he only needs to kill one, referring to her trial by combat, which is the first mention we get of it. So Cersei needs to go on trial, and apparently will choose a trial by combat and Gregor as her champion. So can't wait for that. Next, we see the Small Council for the first time this season, with Kevin Lannister serving as Hand of the King, and Mace and Olenna Tyrell are sitting on the council along with Pycelle, who is whining as usual about Qyburn. But the funniest thing is when he talks about how Gregor Clegane should be destroyed when he's standing right behind him, and he's the only one who doesn't notice this. Pycelle can be funny. And then Cersei and later Olenna quip, but Kevin insists that they have no place on the council, but Jaime counters with that he's the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, and Jaime tries to make common cause with with the people in the council, and saying they want to solve the situation and Dorne, saying that they all need to work together to deal with it. But instead, Kevin ignores him and storms out, and everyone storms out, and which I think was really stupid, because Jaime seemed to genuinely want all of them to work together to overcome their problems, which would be the best thing. So I think Kevin's being stupid here. But I suspect his main issue is not with Jaime, but with Cersei. But I'm hoping he'll come around and that they will make common cause eventually, but we'll see. However, we get another very comical scene where Pycelle tries to move past the mountain after what he said to him. That was really funny. So then we get a scene with Tommen confronting the High Sparrow, which frankly I found a bit boring. However, I think it's setting up the groundwork for the High Sparrow trying to manipulate Tommen and turn him to the faith. And it seems like it might be working, but we'll see. So then we go to Braavos and get a nice little training montage with Arya and the Waif as she slowly learns to fight while being blind, and at the same time she describes Arya's past and how she's not her anymore and that she is no one. Also, I noticed she starts talking like Jack and Hagar, referring to herself as the girl. She also confesses her true feelings about the Hound, which were confused. And next, she mentions again the names on her list: Cersei, Gregor Clegane, and Walder Frey. So I think this show is once again reminding us about these 3 names, which last year was 4 names because Meryn Trant was on that list before she killed him too. So will she kill the other 3? I think so. Otherwise, why keep reminding us? But we'll see. When the Waif replies that it can't be everyone on your list, I wasn't quite sure what she was getting at, because her list used to be bigger back in season 4 because she had people like Melisandre, Doris Amir, but I don't think that's what the Waif was talking about. Arya replies that, what name would you like me to speak? It makes me think it was all about her being an assassin for the Faceless Men again. So after all the progress Arya has made, Jaqen takes her to the deadly water fountain and gives her a cup of that water that usually kills people, and tells her if she is truly no one, she has nothing to fear. So she drinks the water and dies. So that's the end of Arya Stark. She's dead. I'm joking, of course. The water cures her and gives her her sight back. So this tells me that she does truly believe she is no one, because Jaqen said if she was truly no one, she has nothing to fear, so she must be if it worked. We've seen other people who die after drinking that water, so I do really think that she is truly devoted to the Faceless Men. Whether she stays that way, well, that's another question. So that's then the end of Arya's being blind arc. Some might think it was pointless, but I don't. I'm glad that they just got on with it and didn't linger too long on it. And for another thing, I think it did show her truly journeying to become no one, a true faceless man, and that's something we needed to see, as I think this whole storyline was a very important character development for her that will play a role in her character in the future. So lastly, we go to Winterfell, where Ramsay and Lord Karstark meet with Small John Umber, who is pledging an alliance with Ramsay, but refuses to bow to him. Apparently, he's pissed off at Jon Snow for letting the wildlings through the wall and wants to fight them, which is why he wants to make an alliance with the Boltons. He refuses to kneel, but instead gives him a gift, which is Osha and Rickon Stark, whom we last heard were headed to the Umbers. And of course, this really bothered me, as I don't want anything bad to happen to Rickon, but what bothered me worse about the scene was when Small John Umber brought in the head of his direwolf Shaggy Dog, and this is what really bothered me about the scene. When this happened, I was like, no, not Shaggy Dog. So now there are only 3 direwolves left. Jon Snow's ghost, Bran's Summer, and Arya's Nymeria roaming somewhere alone in the Riverlands. So yeah, that really upset me. I'm so fucking sick of the direwolves dying off. I would rather they do something interesting with them, but whatever. I can only hope the same thing won't happen in the books. His Rickon's storyline seems very different in the books, but we'll see. The other interesting takeaway from this scene is Small John says he might have killed his father if he was still alive, which tells us a couple things. One, the new Lord Umber isn't like the old one and is a prick who will likely be a villain to the Starks rather than an ally, and that Great John Umber is dead in the show, which is different from the books because he's still alive in the dungeon at the Twins, but I think this scene indicates that he is dead in the show. Anyway, that's enough about that scene because it really bothered me. So my rating for Oathbreaker out of 10 is a 7, very good. A setup episode, but an interesting one with some great scenes, like seeing what Jon's like after his return. And I'm sure many fans were cheering when Ollie got hanged. Me personally, I found it a bit bitter because you could see how much in pain Jon to do it. And the Tower of Joy scene was awesome, even if it didn't go as far as I wished. And I love seeing the political intrigue in Meereen with Varys and Tyrion, and can't wait to see more. But there were some boring scenes in this episode as well, even if they weren't necessary, like Sam and Gilly on the boat, or Tommen with the High Sparrow, and Daenerys and Vals Dothraki. Plus, the death of Shaggy Dog and the capture of Rickon really upset me. Didn't like that at all. So that's it for my review of Oathbreaker. Be sure to join me and Apkin Tomko for our weekly discussion, as we will be joined by our special guests, Josh and Anna from Geeksiders, to talk about Episode 3 Oathbreaker. But because of our special guests, we had to reschedule, so it won't be until next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in the US, which will be 9 a.m. on Monday morning for me here in New Zealand. So it will be shortly before Episode 4 airs, but I'm sure we'll preview that episode as well. You can find the link to that event in the description below, as well as a link to Geeksiders channel, which, if you're not subscribed already, I would highly recommend checking them out. Also, be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Season 6 of Game of Thrones, as well as many other videos on shows like Star Trek, Fear the Walking Dead, Orphan Black, and more. And make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.